Hey everybody, I'm Ben Yee.
I'm Elissa Stein, and we're picking up where we left off to talk about what exactly is a constitutional crisis.
Right, so we had come from a conversation talking about how the Democrats have retaken the House, and one of the powers they gained from that is the capacity to do things like subpoena testimony and documents, and if they go after Trump's taxes,
Tax returns.
he might not comply.
Right.
So
I
what
would
happens?
think basically he won't comply.
That
Just
seems
gut
likely.
feeling, but I can't imagine at this point in the game he's going to say, "Oh, you know what? Here's a subpoena.
Right.
Welcome to my home. Here are all my tax returns."
So what is a
So
constitutional
he says. So
crisis?
he doesn't. Right. So what is it? Like he doesn't turn in his tax return. Like what is it? What happens? Who declares it?
Yeah.
How does it get cleared up?
So it's not, I suppose, an official legal term of art. So nobody gets to declare, we have a constitutional crisis. More of what it is, a constitutional crisis occurs in one of two situations. One, where jurisdiction over something is ambiguous in the Constitution. So do the states control it? Does the president control it? Does Congress control it? That's
So
one
nobody's
option.
sure who's going to resolve some situation.
Right, and so they'll all fight for control of that
Got
thing.
it. Okay. So that's one.
The second one is when it is clear what happens, but one party doesn't want to comply. So, for example,
I'm not
Congress
doing
clearly
that.
has the power to do something, and the president gets in their way and obstructs them. That's a constitutional crisis
Okay, so-
only because the president is unwilling to follow the
But-
Constitution.
But then it seems to me that we've had plenty of constitutional crises already because with these investigations, the Republicans are supposed to do X and they just don't do it. But that was part of they were supposed to investigate the Russia thing. They were supposed to do this. Wasn't that
Oh.
a crisis in some way because they didn't do what they were supposed to do?
One could argue that's a crisis of democracy, but constitutionally speaking, Congress doesn't have the mandate, or doesn't have they're not forced by the Constitution to do anything. They can
Got
be
it,
lazy, or they can
Lie,
abet a
make
bad
up
president,
shit.
whatever they want to do,
Right,
as
okay.
long as the people keep electing them. So that's not a crisis.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, that's not a
It's just, like,
constitutional
bad
crisis.
faith.
Yeah.
And people just doing a really sucky job.
Now, the number one way that a constitutional crisis would be resolved normally would be through the courts, in particularly the Supreme Court, which decides matters of the Constitution. The big situation we're about to have now is that the Constitution is pretty clear that Congress can subpoena. It's very clear that Congress can do actually many things. If Donald Trump, as president, chooses not to comply, then the Supreme Court will eventually hear that. And the big issue isn't that there's an unresolvable constitutional crisis. The big problem is that because of the partisan
Well, Kavanaugh, who's like clearly a partisan, he makes Neil Gorsuch look like a Democrat.
well, be that as it
I mean,
may,
not really, but he's as partisan can be.
because of the partisan realities of politics right now, including on the Supreme Court, it's not 100% clear what will happen when the Supreme Court makes its decision and whether it will decide with the actual text of the Constitution.
I had a thought.
Okay.
Because I was going to ask you, have there
Yeah.
been constitutional crises before? And
Yeah.
I wasn't sure, but then the Al Gore election.
Yes. So that was a constitutional
That was a
crisis.
constitutional-
The
right.
Supreme Court decided,
And they decided it wrong. They decided it poorly. They made really bad partisan decisions. in
but so
that.
there's one more level to this constitutional crisis, which that did not reach.
Okay.
Which is, let's say the Supreme Court actually decides the way it should. Or we might say the way that we would like it to decide.
Right. So it's our side.
Right.
They should.
Or what we'll say is, let's say they decide against the president. Whatever the president wants, they decide against the president. The judiciary, because of the separation of powers, has no mechanism for compulsion. All of the compulsion lies within the executive, police, military, all of that stuff. So you could have a situation where two branches of government are aligned, the legislature and the courts, against the president, and the president is still denying
Sitting in his
compliance.
gold tower and not participating.
And at that point, you have the true crisis, which is it's unresolvable. And at that point, you have to say, all right, do the courts order the bailiffs, which are essentially the court enforcers, to the White House to arrest the president? Does the
my
legislature
goodness. This sounds
pass
like
a
an
bill to
adventure movie.
order the military to move against the
Right.
president,
Oh,
even though that's
Jesus
not
Christ.
within their authority? It's really not.
Right.
But what do you do at that point when you have a decision that's followed the constitutional process as far as it can go, and there's still a lack of compliance.
It's a little bit scary, even on this day of good news, is that I can easily see that happening. I think that in some way, Democrats regaining power of Congress is going to make things worse, because now they'll actually have an opportunity and permission to do things, and they're going to get smacked down really fast.
What I would say is it needs to reach its climax eventually. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. If the Republicans had won, you'd have a festering of the Republic, and it would rot and it could die. But at this point, we're going to be able to advance the situation either to a constitutional crisis or to a resolution of whatever crisis. And we need to get there.
So I'll end with the most heartfelt analogy that I read in all the things I've been reading today. It was a friend of mine from Canada said, it's like America has cancer, and the midterms were the first sign that chemo is working.
That's not bad.
I was like, yeah, you know what? I get it. I'm fortunate to think that we were in such bad shape, but we are.
I will end with this thought, which is just because we won the midterms doesn't mean you can all go to back to bed.
No. This is, as people have said, we're in it for a marathon, not a sprint. We're just starting, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
And with that,
See ya.
laters.